Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's really interesting, at least to me, that you've all been asking about: wine investing.
Sounds delicious.
It is. Well, hopefully, we'll see. We're going to be going through this really cool guide called Investindo em Vinhos, which, for those who don't know, is Portuguese for investing in wines. And we'll be covering everything: the history, how the market actually works, all the big players, and then the part you've all been asking about: how to build a killer wine collection.
Like a pro.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and fun fact, did you know that some wines are actually traded on global exchanges, kind of like stocks? It's a wild world out there, but don't worry, we'll break it all down. We'll figure out what actually makes a bottle appreciate in value. Spoiler alert, it's not just about how good it tastes. And we'll definitely talk about how to avoid getting scammed or making like dumb storage mistakes that could cost you a fortune. That would be the worst.
I've definitely learned a lot from this guide. It's not just about, loving wine. There's a lot of strategy and knowledge that goes into it, which is where we come in. We're here to help you get started.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So I think a lot of people probably think that wine investing is like a new thing,
Yeah.
right? Like a trendy thing. But turns out it's actually been around for ages.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Way longer than you might think. Think ancient civilizations like Egypt and Rum.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Back then, wine wasn't just a drink. It was like currency.
Wow.
They used it for bartering, showing off their status.
Sure.
Kind of reminds me of how people today are obsessed with like designer bags or luxury cars.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's all about that desire for something rare and special.
Okay, so we've got ancient civilizations using wine as currency. When did it shift from being a status symbol to an actual, like, investment opportunity?
I would say the 17th century was a big turning point. You had improvements in production and better glass bottles. This meant that wines could age for longer, and people started to realize that, hey, some of these wines actually get better with age. And of course, the better they get, the more they're worth.
So that's when people started, like, intentionally storing wine for the long haul, hoping it would increase in value.
Exactly. And then fast forward to the 20th century, you've got auction houses like Sotheby's and Christie's. They started holding these like extravagant wine auctions, and people went crazy for them. It was a spectacle.
I can totally picture it now. Like, people in fancy clothes bidding outrageous amounts on a dusty bottle from who knows when.
It was all about like glamour and exclusivity. And as the market grew, so did the ways to track it. They developed price indices, similar to what we have for the stock market, to follow how wine values change over time.
So by the 1980s, when people were looking for, alternatives to traditional investments, wine was already on the scene. It had already established itself as an asset.
Definitely. And then, globalization happened. The demand for fine wine exploded, especially from Asia.
Yeah, I've heard the Asian market is huge for wine these days.
Huge.
Yeah.
And that demand, along with more and more people wanting to collect, that's really what's driving the market today.
This is all super interesting, but I got to ask, how does wine stack up as an investment compared to, say, stocks or even like gold?
Ah, the million-dollar question. Investindo en Vinos actually dives into this comparison. It breaks it down really nicely. So stocks, they can have really high returns, but they can also be super risky and volatile.
Yeah, you never know which way they're going to go.
Exactly. Then there's real estate.
Yeah.
That can be a good source of steady income, but it's not always easy to sell quickly if you need cash.
True. And then there's gold. That's always been considered a safe haven, right?
Right. And that's where wine actually shares some similarities. Just like gold, wine offers diversification. It can help protect against inflation, and both are, tangible assets. There's a limited amount of both in the world.
Yeah, you can't just make more gold, and you can't just make more of a certain vintage of wine.
Exactly. And that scarcity, that limited supply, is a big factor in driving up the value. Plus, unlike a stock certificate or a deed to a property, you can actually enjoy a bottle of wine. That's a pretty unique perk.
Haha. Yeah, you can actually drink your investment. I imagine that's pretty satisfying. Picture this. You're at a dinner party sipping a glass of wine, and you casually mention, oh, this bottle. It's actually appreciated 15% since I bought it.
Huh. I mean, it could happen, but Investindo en Vinos does caution against making decisions based purely on, like, your emotions. You could fall in love with a bottle just because it tastes amazing, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good investment.
That's a good point. You've got to be strategic about it.
Absolutely. And speaking of strategy, how about we take a virtual tour of the global wine market?
A virtual wine tasting, I'm in.
So first up, we're going to the classics. Bordeaux, Burgundy, Champagne. These regions are basically royalty in the wine world.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely heard those names thrown around in fancy restaurants.
And for good reason.
Hmm.
These regions have centuries of tradition behind them, they have strict quality control, and they just have this reputation for making wines that can age beautifully.
Okay, so those are like the blue chips of the wine world.
Exactly. Now, Investindo en Vinos also talks about New World wines, which are, well, a bit newer to the scene. They're from regions like Napa Valley in California and Barossa Valley in Australia. These are kind of like the up-and-coming stars of the wine world.
Interesting. So they're shaking things up a bit.
They are. Their styles are often a bit bolder, fruitier, and they tend to be more affordable than the old world classics, at least for now.
Okay, so we've got all these incredible regions producing fantastic wines, but how do we know which ones are actually worth investing in? Like, how do we separate the good stuff from the just okay stuff?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And Investindo en Vinos breaks down the key factors that drive a wine's investment potential into four main areas: quality, rarity, provenance, and demand.
Okay, let's unpack those one by one. Quality, I'm guessing that's pretty straightforward. The better the wine, the better the investment, right?
Pretty much. We're talking about wines that consistently get high scores from the big-name critics, wines that are made with incredible attention to detail, and wines that have the potential to age for a long, long time. Think about those famous Bordeaux wines, the Grand Cru Classés. They're like the superstars, especially if they've gotten, a perfect score from someone like Robert Parker or Jancis Robinson.
Oh, yeah, they're like the A-listers in the wine world.
And they
All right, what about rarity? I'm guessing limited production plays a big role.
Absolutely. Wines from small estates or limited edition bottles, or wines from exceptional vintages, these are all naturally more scarce and therefore more desirable. It's like finding a rare first edition of a book, but way more delicious.
I like the way you think. Okay, so we've got quality and rarity. What about this provenance thing? Investino and Vinos seem to really stress that.
Yeah, provenance is all about the wine's history, its journey from the vineyard to your cellar. You want that rare first edition book to have been stored properly, right? Like in a climate-controlled library or something. It's the same with wine. Impeccable storage is key. It ensures that the wine has aged gracefully and hasn't been exposed to anything that could damage it. It's a big deal.
Wow, I'm definitely going to have to rethink my wine storage situation after this. Okay, last one. Demand. Isn't that always changing?
It is. Demand is a fickle beast. It's all about what's hot and what's not. It's influenced by what consumers are into, current trends, even media coverage. If a certain region suddenly becomes trendy, the prices for their wines can skyrocket. Just look at what happened with Japanese whiskey.
That's wild. So it's like this crazy mix of factors,
Right.
where the wine is from, the year it was made, who made it, even what the critics are saying. It all comes together to determine the value of that bottle.
It really is fascinating. And of course, your own personal taste plays a role too. Do you have a favorite type of wine?
Oh, there are so many. But I'm curious, from an investment perspective, are there any wines that are like unexpectedly good investments?
Hmm, that's a good question. What are you thinking?
Like, what about Malbec? That's one of my favorites.
Malbec. That's actually a great example. It's not traditionally considered a top investment category, but some Malbecs, especially from Argentina, they're starting to gain a lot of traction.
Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome. This is making me realize that building a wine collection can be both a passion project and a smart financial move.
it definitely can be both. It's about finding that sweet spot where your passion and your portfolio align.
I like that. But I'm guessing there's more to it than just buying up every delicious bottle I come across.
Oh, for sure. Investindo en Vinos really emphasizes the importance of building your wine collection strategically. And that's what we'll get into after this quick break.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into the nitty-gritty of building a wine collection strategically. Like, where do we even start?
Well, the guide, Investindo en Vinos, really stresses the importance of figuring out your goals first, before you even buy a single bottle.
So, like, am I doing this mainly for profit? Or am I just, a passionate collector? Or, like, a little bit of both?
Exactly. Are you going to drink these wines someday, or are they purely an investment? Your answer is going to, determine your whole approach.
Makes sense. So once I know what I'm aiming for, what's next?
Diversification. Just like with any other investment, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket or, all your bottles from one region or one year.
So spread the love, spread the risk.
Exactly. Different regions, different vintages, different producers. Right. That way, if one region has a bad year or a certain wine falls out of fashion, your whole collection won't be totally wiped out.
Okay, that makes me feel better. But with so many wines out there, how do I even choose? It's kind of overwhelming, right?
Research is your best friend. The guide recommends using resources like critic scores, what the experts are saying, and also looking at option results and using online platforms to help you spot those promising bottles.
So I can't just walk into a wine shop and grab whatever looks pretty.
Well, you can if you're just buying for yourself. But if you're serious about investing, you got to be more strategic. Look for wines with a track record, those high scores from reputable critics, and make sure there's actual demand for them. Check the market trends.
Got it. Research, diversification, check, check. But where do I actually buy these investment-worthy wines?
The big question. There are a few main ways. You got your reputable merchants, your auction houses, online platforms are becoming really popular, and sometimes you can even buy directly from the winery.
Ooh, options. Tell me more about each one.
Sure. Merchants, they often have a really curated selection. They've handpicked the good stuff, and they can give you advice, help you make good choices. Auction houses, that's where you find the rare gems, the really special bottles, but it can be a bit intimidating for beginners.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Online platforms, they're really convenient. You can access wines from all over the world without leaving your couch. And buying directly from the winery, that's a cool experience. You get to meet the winemakers, sometimes snag some limited edition bottles.
That sounds awesome. But with any investment, there's got to be risks involved, right?
Yeah,
Especially with something as fragile as wine.
you're absolutely right. And one of the biggest risks, Investindo en Vinos really hammers this home, is fraud.
Wine fraud. Wait, like fake bottles. Seriously.
I know it sounds crazy, but it happens. You've got these rare, expensive wines. It's basically a luxury market. And wherever there's a lot of money, you're going to find people trying to take advantage.
So how do I avoid getting tricked?
Yeah.
Do I need to hire, like, a wine detective?
It's not quite that dramatic. But you do have to be careful. Always buy from reputable sources. Check for certificates of authenticity. Make sure the bottle is legit. And scrutinize those labels. Look for any signs of tampering.
So, like, making sure the label's not crooked or something.
Yeah. And also check the fill level. Make sure there's the right amount of wine in the bottle. And here in Brazil specifically, you got to be aware of the selo fiscal. It's a tax stamp that's required on all wines sold here.
Oh, I've seen those, but I don't really know what they mean.
It's basically a guarantee that the wine's been imported and taxed properly. It's another layer of protection against fake wines.
Good to know. Okay, so let's say I've found an authentic bottle, bought it from a trusted source. How important is storage?
Super important. Investindo en Vinos dedicates a whole section to it. It's all about creating the perfect environment for your wine to age.
Like, it's more than just sticking it in a cabinet.
Way more. Temperature, humidity, light, even vibrations, all of that can affect how your wine ages, for better or for worse.
Wow, I had no idea it was so sensitive.
It is. You can build a hemp cellar, but that requires some serious climate control, and it can get expensive. Or you can use a professional storage facility. They're designed specifically for aging fine wines with, perfect conditions and top-notch security.
So it's like a vault for your wine.
Pretty much. It's about treating your wine with the respect it deserves. But at the end of the day, remember, it's also about enjoyment. Wine is meant to be drunk.
True. But I can't drink all my investments from
Yeah.
it. At some point, I might want to, sell some of those bottles, hopefully for a profit. How does that work?
That's where the secondary wine market comes in. It's all about selling your wines, either privately or through, options or online
This
exchanges.
is giving me Wolf of Wall Street vibes, all those guys yelling out stock prices.
It's not quite that intense, but there's definitely some excitement there. You've got your traditional auction houses like Sotheby's and Christie's. They're the big names, especially for rare bottles. And then there are online platforms like Livex. It's a global wine exchange. And WineBid, that's an online auction site, more accessible for beginners.
So many options. But I bet there's a learning curve, right? Any tips for first-time sellers?
Investindo en Vinos has some good advice. Always check the reputation of whoever you're dealing with. Read the fine print, the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And be smart about payments. Make sure they're secure.
Safety first, especially when we're talking about valuable wines. Speaker of value, how do I even know what my collection is worth? Do I need to, get each bottle appraised?
That's where organization comes in. The guide really emphasizes keeping good records. You can use apps, software, even just a spreadsheet. Track your purchases, keep all the details about each bottle.
So no more scribbling tasting notes on napkins.
Exactly. And it's not just about being organized. Tracking the market value of your wines helps you make smart decisions about when to sell.
Oh, I see. So I can see if my wines are appreciating as expected and then decide if it's a good time to cash in.
Exactly. You got to consider your own goals,
Mm.
what you want to achieve with your collection, And of course, you got to keep an eye on the market to see what's happening.
Man, this is a lot more complex than I realized. It's like a whole other world.
It is. But it's a fascinating world. It combines like art, history, finance, and of course, the pure pleasure of wine.
Totally. But it's important to remember the risks, right? We talked about fraud and how crucial storage is. Are there other things to watch out for?
Yeah, definitely. The market can fluctuate, prices go up and down. It's like any other investment. Wine prices are affected by the global economy, trends, all that stuff. Just remember, it's generally a long-term game. Don't panic if prices dip. Good wines tend to bounce back over time.
So patience is key.
Exactly. Oh, and speaking of important things to remember, you asked about the legal side.
Oh, yeah. Are there any laws or tax things I need to be aware of, especially here in Brazil?
It's always a good idea to talk to an accountant about that. Import-export regulations, capital gains taxes, all that stuff can be tricky, and it can change.
Got it. Definitely better to be safe than sorry. So we've talked about all these different aspects of wine investing, and it's clear there's a lot to learn. Are there times when it makes sense to, like, call in a
Okay.
professional?
Oh, absolutely. If
Mm.
you have a really big collection or you're trying to do something really complex, or if you just feel lost, a wine consultant can be invaluable.
It's like having a personal wine guru.
Exactly. They can guide you, help you make the best decisions for your specific situation.
This has been so insightful. I'm starting to understand the potential of wine investing, but I also see how much there is to learn and consider. It's not something to just jump into blindly.
And that's exactly what Investindo en Vinos is all about. It's about empowering you to make informed choices, ones that fit your goals and your passion for wine.
I love that. And that actually leads perfectly into my final question for both you and for our listeners. If you could own just one bottle of wine, if you could own just one bottle of wine, just one, to represent your whole journey as a collector, as an investor, what would it be?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. It really makes you think about, like, what really matters. For me, I don't think it would be the most expensive bottle or even the most prestigious one. It would have to be something with, like, a personal connection, a story behind it.
A bottle with a soul.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I want our listeners to think about, too. What's that one bottle that would be, like, the crown jewel of your collection, the one that tells your unique wine story?
Maybe it's a bottle from a trip you took, or a special occasion, or even just a wine that, like, totally blew your mind the first time you tried it,
Or maybe it's a wine that you shared with someone special, one that brings back good memories.
or one that you've been, like, carefully aging, waiting for the perfect moment to open it.
It's a fun question to think about, and there's no wrong answer. It's all about what speaks to you, to your journey with wine.
We'd love to hear what you come up with. Share your dream bottle with us online. Let's keep this conversation going.
Yes, definitely. This has been a really fun deep dive.
It has. And thanks to Investindo en Vinos for such a great guide.
It's a fantastic resource.
It is. All right. To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us. Remember, wine investing is a journey. Do your research, be smart, but most importantly, enjoy the ride. Cheers.